This episode of the Coaching Coordinator Network Best of 2025 is presented by Story of the Season, a powerful way for programs to capture their year and turn it into a meaningful fundraising tool. From honoring players and seniors to engaging families and supporters, Story of the Season helps teams raise funds while preserving what made the year special. As we look back on the conversations that matter most in 2025, this one stands out for what it revealed about leadership, alignment, and building belief fast. Our guest is Jason Eck, head football coach at the University of New Mexico. In his first season in Albuquerque, Coach Eck helped engineer a historic turnaround and was named Mountain West Conference Coach of the Year. This conversation originally aired as part of the Culture OS series hosted by Robert Pomazak, where we explored how coaches build programs from the inside out. Coach Eck shares how culture is assessed, how standards are set, and why consistency of self matters long before results show up on Saturdays. This episode is also paired with our Culture OS Companion, an AI learning tool built entirely from Culture OS episodes, including this one, designed to help you apply these leadership and culture principles to your own program. Welcome to Culture OS, presented by Story of the Season, the series where we explore how elite coaches build programs by design, not by default. Today marks the kickoff of Season 2, and if you're new to this series, we've got something special to help you catch up. A free ebook that highlights episodes from Season 1 featuring powerful insights from state championship coaches, a D3 national champion, the new head coach at Central Michigan, Matt Drinkall, and the head coach at South Florida, Alex Golesh. Inside the book, you'll find how Matt Drinkall built culture through his coaching staff before the team ever took the field, how Kyle Ralph treats the offseason as the real foundation of Friday night success, how Brad Spencer leads a powerhouse by being relentlessly aligned with the program's mission, what Derek Leonard teaches about playing the long game and building for the future, and how Alex Golesh leads with intentionality and humility in a high-stakes Division I role. Every coach featured shares practical systems, not slogans, that you can adapt to fit your program. Grab the free Season 1 ebook at coachandcoordinatornetwork.com/cultureos. The link is also in the show notes. The series is made possible by Story of the Season, the platform that helps coaches raise money and build community by turning their season into a weekly interactive digital magazine. If you want to raise thousands and showcase your culture like the pros, download the free Culture OS ebook and learn how Story of the Season is helping coaches turn their programs into powerful stories that build buy-in and bring support. Now, let's get started with Season 2.
Football teaches so many great life lessons. It's the ultimate team game, with 11 people on the field at one time. There's so many, just how things can go together. You have to have such teamwork working together that I think that prepares you for so many opportunities in life, even outside of football. You have to, handle adversity. The injury rates, I think, in football are probably amongst the highest of all sports. So you got to overcome injuries and the adversity that goes with that. Obviously the ability to work in such a diverse, college football team is certainly such a, a melting pot.
This podcast is brought to you by StoryOfTheSeason.com, a 3-in-1 digital and print media guide platform that gives high school football teams media coverage like the pros, a lucrative fundraiser, and a way to remember their season. Story of the Season is like a game day program on steroids. Each weekly digital magazine interactively recaps every game of the season with write-ups, photos, interviews, and highlights, senior spotlights, and more. Plus, they also do your social media graphics throughout the season. Teams can raise tens of thousands of dollars by selling interactive ads in their digital media guides. Teams provide sponsors an unmatched value and unlimited viewership. At the end of the season, they compile all of the content into a print yearbook, the ultimate keepsake to remember the season by. Don't let your story go untold. Give your program media coverage like the pros. Raise money and give your players a way to remember their season forever. Learn more at StoryOfTheSeason.com.
I'm really excited to bring in our next guest, Coach Jason Eck, head coach in the University of New Mexico. I had the fortunate opportunity to see Coach Eck through the recruiting hallways back when he was it South Dakota State, Coach?
South Dakota State. Yep.
Yeah. And it's just in my research of you, I didn't realize you were a Rose Bowl champion. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, my senior year as a player and then my first year in coaching. I kind of got hooked on coaching pretty easy. I said, this coaching stuff's pretty easy. You win the first year as a GA, you win the Rose Bowl.
It started at the top. That's awesome. You've had a great career early on as an offensive line coach at various institutions, and then offensive coordinator, assistant coach of the year by South Dakota State in 2019. And then you got your first head coaching gig at the University of Idaho in 2021. And your next stop has been to the University of New Mexico this past December. So I guess my question is you've had a really unique path of like player to GA to assistant to OC to now sitting in the seat of a head coach. How have those past experiences as a player and as an assistant shaped you into the coach you are today?
I think one thing that's important in coaching is, and really just in life in general, is to constantly be learning, constantly be growing and getting better. You know, it was a long journey. I had 23 years as an assistant coach before I got the opportunity to be a head coach. But I think all those experiences that I picked up over those 23 seasons, and the good and the bad, you know, sometimes it was not only seeing how to do things, but sometimes seeing how not to do things or trying something that didn't have success and didn't work. And you grow from that and you learn. You know, it was kind of a full circle moment because the first time in my career, Idaho was my first position coaching job. And I spent 5 years as a graduate assistant, both at Wisconsin and then Colorado. And then my first time kind of having my own position group, it was at the University of Idaho, first under Nick Holt. He gave me my first opportunity. And then I spent a year under Dennis Erickson. And then when Dennis Erickson went to Arizona State, I didn't have an opportunity to go with him. And then I did not get retained by Coach Akey when he came in there. You know, and that was the first time I'd kind of been out of a job in coaching where I had to go home and, you know, tell the family we're moving. I actually went through that 3 other times where the head coach left and I had to move on. But I don't know if I'd be here today if I hadn't gone through that. And I think that, you know, going through adversity, I think it's the same thing with a football player or a team. You know, it makes you stronger in the long run. And I think you constantly got to keep doing a great job in the role you have, whatever that is, and dominate your current role. And, you know, I think I found that if you do that over time, you know, good things will eventually happen, but it's not always a straight line of success. There's some ups and downs along the way.
I think one of the things when I was kind of going back through, one of the reasons of doing the podcast is like trying to find those guys from all different levels of football who have gone through process and a journey, and looking at your career track. It's like people might not realize that there's 2 decades worth of years of coaching within there. You started in the late 90s, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, 99 was my first year coaching.
So as I'm in my 25th year of teaching and I'm looking at your career path, and it's like, it's amazing where the time goes. But now that you finally have that opportunity to be the head football coach, it's been fun to see that journey for you from afar. One of the questions I always ask during this podcast is I'm always curious as to people's personal mission, vision, and purpose. And like, so the one thing I always ask is, you went into coaching immediately after playing. Was that always the plan with your professional goal? Or was this something that you kind of really didn't have any other, was it just something you fell into? Or was it something that like, I want to go right into coaching as soon as I'm done?
Yeah, you know, I grew up coach in a coaching family. My father was a college basketball coach for about 25 years. So I do have great memories just growing up of, I never saw my dad dreading Monday morning or dreading going to work. I think he always enjoyed that. And I think that had an effect on me because I think, I try to tell our players that I think no matter what career path you go into, you want to find something that's a passion and something that you really enjoy and have satisfaction in, and something that you're not just punching the clock and try to get out of there to get a check. So that was probably always in the back of my mind. My body developed. I became more of a pulling guard than a shooting guard. So I made the transition more to football. And I think possibly even in the back of my mind, I decided to walk on to the University of Wisconsin. I had some lower level, more D2 FCS partial scholarship things. But I think maybe in the back of my mind was, being around the best coaches possibly I could and being at the highest level. And those guys really marked me, the people I was around. Barry Alvarez, I learned so much from him, both playing and being a grad assistant for them. Jim Huber, who was my position coach I played for with the offensive line. Even right now out here at New Mexico, I brought out Kevin Cosgrove, who's a veteran coach. He was the D coordinator at Wisconsin when I was a player in GA. And then he also spent 8 years at New Mexico. So now he's in retirement, and I brought him out here for a few days just to give us a fresh set of eyes and kind of, coach our coaches a little bit. So I always had it in the back of my mind. My mom had seen the bad part of coaching, growing up, just, up, especially at the college level. I think that's something I always tell even, former players when a player tells me they want to get into coaching, I kind of ask them, well, hey, do you want to kind of control where you live, or are you open to going anywhere? Because if you really want to live in a certain part of the country, you might be better off, being a high school coach, where if an opportunity doesn't work at one school, there's another one down the street. But, we had to relocate our family. My dad was the head basketball coach at the University of Toledo. And I was set to go to high school in Toledo. And, they ended up making a run in the MAC tournament and went to the championship game and lost the MAC tournament championship game by 1 point. And then my dad was forced to resign. So I kind of think about that, like where I went to high school was really determined by a basket. He was kind of forced to resign, and then I ended up going to high school in Atlanta, Georgia at St. Pius X High School. So, I saw that, and my mom tried to discourage me, maybe from being in coaching. I actually was signed up to take the LSAT. I think I paid the money to take the LSAT to go to law school. Maybe I thought I'd be a sports agent or something, and then that fell by the wayside. Right after my last game, we got back from the Rose Bowl my senior year, and I went in and talked to my offensive line coach and said, hey, Coach Huber, I really want to coach, and can you help me kind of get started and get a GA job? And that I had a couple interviews, but ended up starting, getting the opportunity to stay at Wisconsin and being a graduate assistant there. So it was kind of always in probably the back of my mind. It really didn't come to the forefront for sure until right there my senior year in college.
Man, that's a really unique perspective. I didn't realize that the perspective you have as a child going all the way through then your collegiate days, and then you get into, you're at the highest level of football. Very interesting. As a coach, what is like your day-to-day mission when you're walking in, like your personal day-to-day mission when you're around your players? And what's the long-term vision that even as an assistant and then as a coordinator, now as a head coach, like what do you hope the long-term benefit for your kids is when they are done with you?
Well, I think I want the players and the student athletes to have a great experience. I think it should be developing fond memories you're going to have for the rest of your life. I get to coach a game, they get to play a game. It should be fun. I think you want your players to look forward to coming to practice or to coming to meetings or be around the facility. That's something I really look for in hiring my staff. I want guys on my staff who have a really good energy about them. People you want to be around, people that, not only are good football coaches, but just you enjoy their company. You'd like to, go for a walk with them or have a beer with them. And, because I think that you want players to, be attracted just being around those guys. And then, I think we're really developing people. I think football teaches so many, great life lessons. It's the ultimate team game, with 11 people on the field at one time. There's so many, just how things can go together. You have to have such teamwork working together that I think that prepares you for so many opportunities in life, even outside of football. You have to, handle adversity. The injury rates, I think, in football are probably amongst the highest of all sports. So you got to overcome injuries and the adversity that goes with that. Obviously the ability to work in such a diverse, a college football team is certainly such a melting pot. In our team, we got white guys, black guys, Polynesian guys, Hispanic guys, we have a few Asian American guys, or even we have a player from Japan on the teams. You work with so many people from so many diverse backgrounds, and to be able to come together and, have great teamwork and the work ethic and the time management, I just think you're really trying to prepare those guys for life after football and helping them, at the simplest level, become, a good father, a good husband one day, but also just being productive members of society that are going to have success no matter where they go. And, hopefully a few of those guys will have a chance to play some, pro football and do some things afterwards, but, most of them will not. And even the ones that do have played pro football, may only play for a year or two. So, football comes to an end for most people before they want it to. I think developing people, I think, is one of our callings. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things for me as a coach, is seeing that. And it was really special for me at my last stop at Idaho, because I had been an assistant there, from 2004 to 2006. It was really neat having, former players that I got to coach as an assistant come back then when I was the head coach, and, meet their wife, meet their kids, and, have them say a few words to the team and talk about, their journey and what they're doing in life. Because I think so many guys, football is such a big part of their identity growing up, playing as a kid, playing in high school, playing in college. Sometimes it's tough on guys of figuring out what's next when it ends. And so I'm always I was talking today to a former player at New Mexico who's now one of the deputy chief of police for the Albuquerque Police Department. And I'm going to have him come and talk to the team about that, because that might be a good option for some of our guys when they're done, because that's still an arena where you're part of a team and you have to have great teamwork, and a lot of the things you learn from football would carry over.
I love that perspective at your level, because it doesn't change much at our level. It's like it really is about developing the person. You're obviously the scheme and all of that is going to be forefront, and it's what you're doing daily, but there's always got to be the relationship aspect behind it. And I very distinctly remember you on the recruiting trail. I felt like that was what stood out about you the most, was your ability to create relationships with kids, immediately showing your care for them in their development. Even if it wasn't somebody who was going to end up wearing your jersey, you still always had a care for those guys. And I always thought that was what was really unique about you coming through our building in particular, because we see a lot of guys, you see hundreds of coaches every year, and a few stick out, and you certainly were one of them. Just with it was palpable what you just mentioned about there's more to it. Like, we're going to get you better as a human, regardless of the football aspect of it. But, transitioning to football, like, this is the second head coaching position for you. And I always find it really interesting. It's a CEO position. It's not just X's and O's. When you walk into a new position, whether it was at Idaho or here at the University of New Mexico, how are you initially assessing the culture that you're walking into? What's some of the background work that you do, and maybe some of the boots on the ground work that you do early on?
Well, I think you really have to investigate opportunities. Idaho was unique because I had been there as an assistant. So I knew, a lot more about the town and about the university. With New Mexico, where I had not been there before, I really did my homework. And I talked to a lot of coaches who'd spent time there. Kevin Cosgrove was one. Jamie Christian, who I had worked with at Idaho, had been here as an assistant. Bob DeBess, who's a retired ball coach who I had gotten to know when he was at Georgia Southern, and went down and visited him to talk some football with him. He had been here as an assistant. So, really trying to talk, to people just to understand, the different parts of the U.S. are so unique. And, there's a very unique culture in New Mexico that's special. And, just seeing the lay of the land and what people thought who'd been here in the past. And the more I found out about it, I thought, hey, I think there's an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity to do better than they have done in the past. And certainly coaches like Rocky Long really had it rolling here. And, Bob Davie had a year. He won 9 games and went to a bowl game. That's the most recent bowl game we went to in 2016. It's been too long. But, I thought there was an opportunity. And then, when I got here, there's so many different people that you have to interact with as a college, football coach, whether it's meeting football alums, guys who played there in the past, because they have such a investment and care for the program, whether it's meeting the boosters, whether it's meeting the other coaches in the department and the support staff throughout that, the people on the academic side of campus, having a good relationship with the school president. And then probably the most important of all that is your current players. I tried to have a sit down meeting for about 20 minutes with everybody, on the team. Just getting to know them better. Because, when you come in, it's a little different when you're involved in recruiting a guy and you went to the high school and, sat in the kid's living room, you know a little bit more. When you inherit players, you got to really take the time to sit down with them and ask them about their family and find out about, just their background and where they're coming from and just, what their experience is. How has their experience been at the University of New Mexico? What's been good? What's been bad? What do they think are some things that we got to improve on? Just to try to see what your baseline is, where you're at and where you're starting from, and then start to kind of implement the direction, you want to take the program. But I do think it's critical. I don't think it's a lot different at the high school level. I know as a high school head coach, you're kind of, you got to adapt with, who's in the building, who's in your district and things. And a college coach, even though we can recruit, you don't have time to wait until you get all your own guys in the program. You don't always get 4 years. So you got to do a great job of investing in the players you inherit, your current players, and making sure they feel like, hey, you're their, they're your guys. It's not like they're the old coach's guys, and really finding a way to, to win them over and have them excited to play for you and have them excited to be a part of the new direction of the program.
Coaches are always looking for better ways to support their program. Story of the Season allows teams to document their year and use that story as a fundraising resource that families and supporters actually want to be a part of. Details on Story of the Season are in the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode.
It really is a feeling out process on both sides. You've got to earn their trust as the new leader, and they have to earn your trust as part of your program. So I can only imagine in those first, I was talking to Matt Drinkle over at Central Michigan, how time consuming and how difficult it is to manage that initial transition, like these months of December till now with spring ball coming up, and that's not even including family and all that. Like, how do you manage it? How do you collaborate with your staff to ensure that you're getting all of these systems checked and everything is moving forward the way you need it to?
I think it really prepared me being a second-time head coach. I kind of knew what I was getting into, because I think when you take a new job, those first 4 to 6 weeks are truly like drinking water out of a fire hose. You have so much stuff that's going on. Your phone is, it can be overwhelming, the amount of calls and text messages you're getting. It's enjoyable because you're hearing from people you haven't heard from in a while, and people are congratulating you. People want to be a part of your staff and what you're doing. People want to be a part of it, But it can be overwhelming. I think it helped me, the second time going through it, I knew what to expect. But you got to stay in the moment. You got to carve out some time. I found as a head coach, sometimes my most productive times are either later at night or really early in the morning when you have less stuff on your plate or less people coming to find you, to try to do a good job in all those areas. The family part's important too, because, the transition of your family, I have 5 kids. So, the transition of relocating your family and, finding a new home and getting in schools. And I was excited just to get my family moved into our new house. Last night was the first night we slept in our new house. And I had a son who played for us at Idaho, who transferred down to us with New Mexico. So that added a new layer to this transition to it. But you really have to kind of carve out time. You can't, cheat one area over the others. I mean, you can't do 10 things at once. So you got to really, prioritize, but there's a lot of moving parts that you have to do. And, I think you have to, as a head coach, you have to delegate. You have to have a great staff that you put together. I think probably my most important decisions I make as a head coach are the people I'm going to bring into the building, whether it's the coaches that we're going to hire and then the players that we bring in, and making sure that they're adding to the environment we have and are positive influences and, aren't bringing negativity into the building. And then I've always been under the belief that you want to hire good people and let them do their job, not micromanage them, because there's so many hats you have to wear.
Right. At this particular point, I know your time is tight. I have 3 more questions for you, and I appreciate your depth that you're going into with this, Coach. What does year 1 look like for you guys this year? What's the program message, and what's something that you want the University of New Mexico to hang their hat on?
Well, I want to make sure we're progressing. I think we have to show improvement as a program. Last year, it's kind of a unique situation here because I'm following a coach who was just here for a year. So our players, a lot of our players have been here. I'll be their third head coach in 3 years here. So we want to see progress. And, again, you want to see progress that's kind of the intangible stuff that you got to look for just in your effort, your enthusiasm at practice, your work ethic, how you're going about it, your attention to detail as far as doing your assignment right. But you also want tangible stuff. You want to I want to show that we can win more football games than we did last year. And, this University of New Mexico, we're coming off of a 5-7 year. So for us, it's getting to 6 wins, which is a very big number at FBS football to get you to bowl eligibility. So, we need to show progress in all areas. And again, I do think, starting fast is critical to build momentum within your program. We were able to do that at the University of Idaho. Our first year, we got to 7 wins where they were coming off of a 4-win season. And I think that momentum really got us started on the upswing. And I think that's important. And you have to get everybody pointing in the same direction. I think that's really critical, just having alignment within your staff so that, the players are hearing the same messages that they're hearing from me, that they're hearing from the position coaches, they're hearing from the strength coach, or hearing from our mental strength coach who works for the team. And just having that alignment within your whole organization where everyone's pointing in the same direction, I think is very critical.
That's a great lead into my next question about that alignment, all of those arrows within your program all pointing in the same direction. What's the onboarding process for you guys like? Are you taking everybody through the same rhetoric of this is how our football program is going to be run, or is it individual meetings? Like, how does that work at your level?
Yeah, I want to make sure we're on the same page. And again, things that I really believe in, we talk about championship behavior. I think you got to become a champion and then figure out how to do things. You got to have all the behaviors that will lead to championships, and you got to display those before you actually are going to get to the point where you're ready to win a championship. For us, I believe, and this was probably my background. I studied psychology. That was my undergrad degree at the University of Wisconsin. Consistency of self. That's just always stuck with me. I think I had that my freshman year in a class, and it's always stuck with me. It's just, people usually have carryover from one area of their lives to another. It's very hard. And I would say just from this would be my 27th year coach, and I spent 4 years as a college football player. So in 30 years of being college football, I'd say there's probably 1% of people I've been around who could be unaccountable off the field and then all of a sudden flip a switch and be really accountable on the field. Usually I think there's a correlation between the guys who are getting in trouble downtown or getting in trouble in the dorms, who are skipping class and not turning in assignments. A lot of times those are the same guys who an O-lineman or tight end who jumps off sides on 3rd and 1, or a defensive player who gets a out of bounds late hit penalty when you should have been off the field on 3rd and long, and now you give them a free set of downs. So we really try to stress how doing a good job with your life and accountability is probably our number one core value, doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it in all areas of your life. And I think it becomes easier for you to do things right in football when you have your whole life aligned. You're not doing things off the field that are unaccountable and not taking your business. And again, I think when you're coming in new, I think it's easier to set a high bar and then back off. It's tough if you're too lax right away to then go back and try to tighten things down later. So we try to be on our guys just with making sure they're putting good effort into the classroom. They're doing little things right away from football. And I think that does carry over. I think the team I inherited at Idaho the semester before I got there had a team GPA of when that team won 4 games, our team last fall that won 10 games had a team GPA of 3.32. And I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that was a direct correlation between those two things.
So my last question, first of all, the consistency of self is something I think I'm going to steal. I wrote it down because, at the end of the day, we're accountable to one person. We're accountable to our own personal standards and our own personal efforts. But I also believe you talked about the behaviors that win. We have that in our program as well. It's we are trying to elicit behaviors that are going to get us closer to victory. And that's a 24/7 thing when you're talking about developing that in young men and then a program wide, a whole program. So, to see the fact that you've been able to do that and have that success at your previous stop. I guess my last question is, what is harder to you? Is building success harder or sustaining it?
Well, I'm still learning, I would say, because that'll be part of my growth here. Because, we were able to show progress all 3 years I was at, Idaho. We went from 7 wins to 9 wins to 10 wins. I think that'll be a great test for me the first time, we maybe take a step backwards. And football is such a competitive game.
Right.
That's a tough part of our business is, half the teams, lose, whether they're Friday night for you guys or whether Saturday afternoon for ours. It's a zero-sum game. But I think you need to just really focus on how you do things in your process, which you go through. I know it's a little bit cliche to say that, but I think you got to constantly be striving to getting better until you maybe, sit on that mountaintop. And I haven't sat on that mountaintop. I haven't been part of an undefeated team yet. I've had the opportunity to coach in 2 national championship games, one at the Division II level at Minnesota State. We lost that game to Colorado Pueblo. And then when I was at South Dakota State, we went to the national championship game and lost. Coach Stiglmeyer, who's another great mentor of mine who I worked for at South Dakota State, he used to always talk about, and I'm so happy finally the year I left, he won a national championship. But he used to always talk about even when we eventually did win a national championship, we were still going to come back after that game and have a lot of things that we could correct and do better from that championship game. And I'm sure he retired, so I guess he didn't have to fix those things that they might have screwed up in that game. I think you just got to constantly be looking to get better and improve and to keep growing and to keep learning. So, I think they're both a challenge, whether it's building success or maintaining.
Either way, you got to come into work the next day, right? Whether the job doesn't change, whether you win a national championship or you finish second, you still got to show up and get it done. I think spoken like a true head coach. Coach Jason Eck, our time has run out. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time. I wish nothing but the best for the University of New Mexico football this year and for you. And I know that your family, I was looking on Twitter and I think you guys packed everybody up and moved, like you said, and now you're in the new house. So you're juggling a lot, but you do it with a lot of grace and a lot of class. So best of luck to you, Coach. All right, take care. Thank you. See you, man. Have a good one.
That wraps up this best of 2025 conversation with New Mexico head coach Jason Eck. What stands out in this episode is the reminder that culture is not a slogan. It is a daily behavior, clear standards, and leaders who live what they are asking of others. If you are looking for practical ways to support your program beyond the field, the Story of the Season gives coaches a way to document their year and use that story as a fundraising resource that families and supporters actually want to be a part of. You can find more information in the show notes. You can also explore the Culture OS Companion built exclusively from the Culture OS Conversations to go deeper on accountability, alignment, and program identity using real coaching examples. Thanks for being part of the Coaching Coordinator Network. We'll see you next time.